Hi folks, today I'm going to be talking about SUMIFs function and SUMIF, but I'm going to tell you why I never use SUMIF anymore. So I'll start off just by looking at the two functions, seeing what the difference is and seeing why there are two nowadays. So these functions are there to add up a range of numbers based on some other condition. So in this example, we're going to add up the numbers from this block below. In the first instance, we're just going to do it where the region is region 1. Then we'll add in a second condition afterwards. So to do that with SUMIF, equals SUMIF. Now my range is the range where the criteria are that we're going to be testing. The criteria itself is just the cell that has the value we're in. That could be hard-coded in the formula, but always nice to have it separate. And then the sum range is the range of values. So if I control enter there, so region 1 is giving us 601.9, which is correct. So it's adding up these values when the region is region 1. So we're now going to do the same thing with SUMIFs. Equals SUMIFs. Now the terms here just come in a slightly different order. So we start with the range of values. We then go to our criteria range. And finally, the criteria itself. So no surprises there. We get exactly the same answer. So SUMIF can only do this for one criteria. The plural SUMIFs is there because we can use multiple. If I go back into the formula so we can see the screen tip, we've got criteria range 1, criteria range 2, criteria 2, and that just goes on and on. So you can do your SUMIF with multiple criteria, which we're going to do now because we've got a product here as well. So let's say, for example, we wanted to pull out only region 1 product B. So this is what our formula would look like. We've now got SUMIF the values, where the region is region 1 and the product is product B. And if I copy that across, 259.1 should be the sum of all of these product B's. Oh, too far. 259.1. Perfect. So SUMIF cannot do that. That is why SUMIFs was introduced. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about why I never use SUMIF. There's a few reasons. The first reason is I think the order of the terms in SUMIFs is a little bit more logical. Sum this, if that. It's in the same order as the name SUMIF. Whereas in SUMIF, if this, then do the sum. So I like the order of SUMIF slightly better. The other thing with SUMIFs, you can see in the example we did there, we started with just one criterion before we added the product, and adding the second one was really easy. We just had to add it on to the end. If you started by writing a SUMIF, thinking you were only going to use one criterion, then to change this to add the product, you have to make it a SUMIFs, you have to cut your criteria range and criteria, remove the comma, put the comma after your sum range and paste your criteria in. You've got to rearrange it because they're in different orders. And that's a bit of a pain. So if you started thinking I only need one, and then you come back and you need two criteria later, it's a more difficult change. To show the other example, I've got a very basic P&L here. And we have 12 months, and then we've got it summarizing quarterly. So in this first example, I've used the SUMIF. So SUMIF, where the blue region equals Q1, add up what's in my purple region. And on the row below, I've done the same with SUMIFs. So SUMIF blue, where the orange equals purple. Now, when these are on the same sheet, if I use control left square bracket to take me to follow that formula into where it's going. On the same sheet, it can highlight all the ranges that I'm using. And that'll be the same for both SUMIF and SUMIFS. But it's very common in a financial model to have your monthly, quarterly and annual statements on different pages. So on my quarterly tab, I've got exactly the same thing. But now when I follow my formula through by left square bracket, or by double clicking depending on your settings, that doesn't highlight all the areas it's using. It only takes me to the first reference, which in a SUMIF is the criteria range. Let's contrast that with SUMIFS. If I follow that through, it doesn't take me to the list of quarters, it takes me to my values. And I think that's way more useful. Obviously I've only got a tiny little P&L, but if you had a P&L covering 150 lines and then you had your balance sheet and then you had your cash flow statement, you could be over several hundred lines. And if you're right down at the bottom and you want to know exactly where your data is coming from, being able to follow it to the data is so much better than it always taking you up to the top. Because if I'm going from my 300th row here, want to know where it comes from, double clicking or left square bracket would take me up to here. I have to scroll down 300 rows again. Whereas doing it from the SUMIFs takes me straight to my data, and as a sense check, as a little audit for yourself, you know if that's picking up the right row or not. Much more useful. So there we go, SUMIF versus SUMIFs. And I never used SUMIF before because SUMIFs can do the one condition itself. The order is more sensible. You can add more criteria to the function much more easily. And if you're summarizing on a separate page, following that formula through will take you to the data instead of the criteria at the top. Thanks very much for listening. I'm Jake, and I hope to speak to you soon.